Hello and welcome. My name is Justin, and welcome to A-Link Tabletops. In this series of videos, I'm going to be going through from the beginnings of just deciding that you want to play Dungeons & Dragons, or some other tabletop, I don't know, but this is mainly geared towards Dungeons & Dragons. From deciding that you first want to play Dungeons & Dragons, all the way up to just before starting your very first game. If you are a new player, this video series is designed for you, and I'm going to be doing everything I can to help take you through the entire process step by step along the way. And in this video, we're going to be discussing what is Session Zero. So, Session Zero is essentially it's a pregame session before you actually start your adventure in whatever world it is you're playing, be it a pre-made adventure that your dungeon master is running, to all the way up to maybe even a full-length homebrew campaign. I don't know. That is what Session Zero is designed to tell you, though. At Session Zero, that is where new groups can kind of meet each other, understand what what each player would like to experience in the game. It's where you discuss scheduling and things like that. So I'm gonna be going through my own personal checklist that I go through for Session Zeros, and I'll be kind of giving you an idea of what exactly it is. So, to start off with, we sit down for Session Zero. It has begun. We've hit the time marker for our start. And the very first thing that I like to do is everyone will go around the table and just introduce themselves. Say we have 5 people, each person one after will introduce themselves. And I like to ask some questions. One being, what is one thing that you love about role-playing games? I'll start. My personal favorite is emotional stories with people. Experiencing intimate and intricate feelings of emotions in the role-playing with other players at the table. I love the deep emotions that you get from retching stories, from love stories that are blooming, from action that really gets the heart pumping. All of that. That's my personal favorite. Another question that I like to ask is, as a player, what's one strength that you bring to the group? Some people may be more analytical, able to really understand different scenarios, different combat encounters, and really have a deep understanding of what everyone's characters are and what they can do, and kind of being a bit of a planner, a strategist of the group. Other people may be really good at understanding their specific character to the core, to the bones of their abilities, and really be a professional at playing that character, such as in combat or in social interactions. I don't know. But typically I go around the table, everyone introduces themselves, I ask them these questions, and we get a general idea of what each party member brings to the table. The next thing that I would typically discuss, if I haven't already figured it out pre-game, is scheduling. You'll want to, typically the Dungeon Master will use this as an opportunity to really set and solidify the schedule, determine what would be required for a game to maybe be canceled, how many players that you need per session to keep moving forward, things such as that. Discuss what the DM would do if a player is absent. Maybe like I like to write the character kind of out of the story for the day. So a good example is one party member was sick for a day, so I actually took it as an opportunity to write in a bit of their backstory, where for that session their character was gone because they were essentially kidnapped by a group of pirates that were actually chasing them. It was part of how they ended up in the group in the first place, was that their character was being chased by a group of pirates after having fought them on the seas, and this group had followed the player all the way into Icewind Dale, was the game that we were playing, and they finally had that encounter where unfortunately the player was actually kidnapped, and eventually they actually made their way back into the group because the bad guy that they were fighting essentially at that point had actually destroyed and almost killed all of the pirates that were attacking the player and had kidnapped them, and ended up basically the player had been thrown into a crate. Tied up and thrown into a crate, and the bad had actually picked up the crate and carried it back home where the rest of the party was actually infiltrating. Things like that. So that's kind of the scheduling side of things. The next thing that I like to do is go over my table expectations. This is essentially what I'm okay with players doing at the table, such as whether or not eating food is okay. Of course, that's okay for me. Eating food, drinks, all that is totally fine, especially because most of my games are held online. Deciding if alcohol is okay, what type of phone use is okay, how much time should be allotted to reviewing rules, things like that. This is also typically where I would go through and discuss the lines and veils, is what it's called. Lines and veils are essentially the lines that people are not willing to cross in terms of content of the game. Say someone is extremely arachnophobic to the point to where even having a spider in the game could set them off or trigger them. That type of thing is what would be discussed in session 0. I usually do a checklist that I send out to the players before even starting session 0, so that way things can remain anonymous. I don't like to call out people for the things that they are afraid of or even things that they can't help. So that's another thing that would be discussed in the table expectations, whether or not PvP, player versus player combat, is allowed. And typically I don't allow it. There are some very rare occasions where it's okay, but I don't personally like the idea of infighting between the party, like actually fighting. Arguments and things like that are totally cool. Anything role-playing wise is okay as long as everyone understands and is okay with what's being said and how things are being said. So that's the section where you would discuss table expectations. After that, I like to discuss the campaign. What story are we playing? Are we playing through a pre-written book? Are we playing through something that I've homebrewed? Are we playing something that's kind of a hybrid of the two? We'll go over the campaign setting, what the world is like, how much magic is accessible to the players or to the world around them, the levels of technology, discussing the kind of environments that they'll be in, the themes of the story. Is it post-apocalyptic? Is there a lot of political intrigue? Is there mystery, horror? Discussing major threats, elemental forces, the undead, devils and demons, all that kinds of stuff. This is where you would also, this is where I would begin discussing the character, what level the characters will start at, what restrictions are there on races, on classes, on subclasses, on all that kinds of stuff. That's all typically under the campaign framework. Okay. Next, and finally, before we get to the character creation section, is going over all of my house rules. I tend to have a lot of house rules. Well, I can't say a lot. The 2 house rules that I have in every game are I have my own homebrewed versions of nat 20s and nat 1s. Nat 20s being crit rolls on a d20, nat 1s being crit fails on a d20, criticals. I like the idea that on a critical, you can continue to roll 2 or 3 more times one or two more times to determine the extent of what the crit is. And the farther the crit goes, the more intense the implications of that can become. And it's the same thing with a critical failure. I like the idea of there being real stakes to rolling a 1 on a d20, such as if you're making a shot with a bow, and you knock the arrow, pull it back, and then you roll a crit fail. Your finger is a little too greasy and it slips off of the bowstring, letting the arrow fly as it pierces the shoulder of your fellow party member, doing the damage that it would have done to an evil character, to one of your to one of those on the other side, instead being dealt to another party member because you accidentally rolled a crit fail. Or maybe something along the lines of you are climbing an icy cliff face, and along the way up you roll a crit fail. However, instead of just slipping on the rock or slipping on the ice's face, you actually end up climbing up onto a stalagmite. I think tight's the one that comes down. You climb up onto a large icicle that has formed on the edge of the cliff without realizing it, and beginning to hear the cracking of the ice above, it breaks away and you fall down the chasm, rolling all the way down until you land softly, but still taking a little bit of damage from a very cold river down below. Now you're cold, now you're wet, and you have to figure out how to survive while being completely drenched in freezing cold water. Something along those lines. But those are the kinds of things that I like to go over in the house rules section. And then finally, some DMs actually like to run character creation at the Session Zero table. They would prefer to actually build everyone's characters together so that maybe it gets a little bit more cohesivity, if that's even a word, out of the group. Everyone has a much better idea of what each PC player character brings to the table, brings to the game. It's also where I personally always allow the players to make their characters before the game starts, but in this case, we would make the characters, and then following that, we would get everyone's backstories integrated into the world that we're playing in. So, yeah, that's typically the framework of how I run my Session Zeros. It's where you'll do some team building at the beginning, have some introductions, learn a little bit about everyone and what their favorite parts about role-playing games are. Go into scheduling, make sure that everyone's on the same page going in week after week or month after month, depending on how often your group decides to play. Following that, moving into table expectations, what's okay at the table and what's not. Going into the campaign framework, understanding the world you're playing in, the rules that surround it. If there's any specific rules, such as in Icewind Dale, there's blizzards and avalanches that you'll need to know about. Going into my own house rules, and then finally working the characters into the story, whether it be building the characters from the start and then integrating the backstories, or just already having the characters made, maybe even having the backstories written and then integrating those stories into the world. So that is Session Zero in a nutshell, essentially. So I hope you all liked this video. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up. If you want to, please subscribe and join me for the next video in this Prepare to Play D&D series. Once again, I love you all. I'm Justin. This is A-Link Tabletops, and I hope you have a very nice day.